there everyone, thanks for tuning into the Industry Insider series. I'm Lily and I'll be your host for today. Joining us we have Darren Lau. Darren is a former CFO advisory at one of the big four accounting firms PwC, and currently he's the head of finance and operations at Husky, a design company focused on developing products from the waste material of coffee production. He undertook a Bachelor of Commerce Liberal Studies at the University of Sydney with a triple major in psychology, anthropology and accounting. Please welcome Darren.
Thanks. That's a nice introduction. Thanks for your work.
Oh, thank you.
In your bedroom and in my study room.
Yeah. Unusual circumstances right now, but it's a good introduction to our podcast. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully it'll be a bit of fun.
Oh, good.
Hopefully it'll be
yeah.
Not useless. Yeah.
I'm sure you know that majority of our listeners, Darren, are high school students. So for our first question, would you mind sharing your high school experience with us, perhaps where you attended and what subjects you took?
Yeah, I went to the best boys' school in the state, North Sydney Boys High School. And what was I like in high school? I think people change over the years. So I wasn't like what I am now. I'm married, I guess now. I wasn't back then. I would say I was probably the last year in North Sydney Boys where there was a little bit more of a diversity in race. I don't know if is that right thing to say?
Diversity, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and consequently, maybe we weren't the most. We were the year that didn't perform as well, and consequently now North Sydney Boys is a good school because of my year.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. The make or break year group, I see.
Yeah. So we really made the legacy of what our school is now. Yeah,
that's pretty amazing. Big claim to make there. So we've decided that you're kind of like a finance industry expert, and I'm sure some of our audience members are interested in pursuing finance. What should someone thinking of joining the finance industry do during or after high school and university? For example, we've been given advice on like internships, courses, just having basic finance skills like Excel. What are your thoughts on these?
Yeah, it's interesting. Firstly, I wouldn't say I would be a finance expert. Mm-hmm. I only had a few years of experience outside of university. But in terms of, if I were to look back, and maybe to clarify, if I were to differentiate between maybe finance and accounting. So I majored, one of my majors was accounting. It was actually one of the last kind of insurance policy. I should probably do accounting as well as, psychology and anthropology. Accounting will get me a job. And I became a chartered accountant off the back of my experience at a big four. That's kind of slightly different to maybe a lot of other people and how they might think about what finance looks like. So finance, you think of it as maybe investment banking or analysis in a different sort of angle. And if you studied finance, it's like I didn't take in finance units. I think maybe finance, there'd be more of an economic side to it. So I guess I can share high level my observations of how others through high school prepared themselves for university and for work compared with what I kind of did, which wasn't. So really, like back when I guess everyone was looking at the options of university and where they were studying, I personally wasn't too resolved on where I should or what I would want to be. And I don't think necessarily you should be so fixated on, I'm going to have this career when you're only in year 12, because there's so many other I look back and I barely knew myself. I barely know myself now. So like the moment you limit yourself, you go on this journey where the doors just kind of, all the opportunities start closing if you start focusing and saying, hey, I want to take a cadetship and join a big four. And I have met quite a lot of people that's for quite a large part of university. I was quite envious of those people who during high school had lined up a cadetship, when I was still just, I don't know what I was doing with myself, studying the HSC. Other people were studying the HSC and also applying for cadetships and scholarships, and they got in, and you could kind of see just the sense of confidence these people had when when they were studying full-time and also working full-time and had money and everything, whereas I, on the other hand, didn't know what I was doing, hadn't lined anything up, and then went to university. Found it hard to even get a job at Macca's. Macca's even rejected me not because I'm incompetent, but because my university schedule didn't allow it. But like that contrast, during that season was quite. Well, it made me wonder if I went back to high school, would I have taken a cadetship? Would I have done more courses or done Excel and I did meet. Well, fortuitously, I got into a Big Four, and I did meet some of those who started off with the cadetship. Whether they willingly chose it or not, or more often than not, actually their parents just kind of like, hey, you should do this, or they had this sort of blind ambition. And actually, more often than not, they were there was a slight degree of regret, because the enjoyment of the season of university is actually a sense of freedom to explore more of yourself, more of the world around you, how you interact with the world. And then after that, I guess if you have the resources, you then have a bit of fun and then look for a job, not out of a desperation, but actually out of a resolve of knowing what you are good at, what you're not good at, and where you want to go. Like if you do that too early, such as year 12 or even just the beginning parts of university, it can really lock you down and limit you. And that's what I noticed, is that there were those who they were promoted higher, they were one grade above me at a Big Four consulting firm, but they regretted because they wondered actually what could have university been like if I didn't have this burden of responsibility to actually keep on churning, because you will churn, and like you will, you'll get if you're relatively smart, relatively hardworking, and doors open, you'll get a job, and you might you might be 1 year behind some of these people who have had cadetships, but what you gain from the freedom is so much. It's invaluable, I would say. My suggestion in terms of, I think, did you say advice around preparing yourself for the finance industry? I would say maybe potentially cast your net a bit wider, have an even wider sort of frame of mind, and go, hey, do I want to do finance? Maybe I just have a bit of, study something that's relatively useful, but don't lock yourself down, because success is more than you get a job at a Big Four and you get a, I don't know, 6-figure salary or 7-figure salary. Definitely a lot more than that. And you'll regret. That's annoying if you regret.
I see. I think that's a really important point that you mentioned, how I suppose high school students like us, we really want clarity on what kind of direction to take in life, whether that be university degree or job prospects. And there is this idea that's been set upon us by most of our parents, I believe, and maybe sometimes even teachers, that a university degree is going to guarantee you a job, and hence what you choose is going to be really important. Although there are so many stories of, people maybe dropping out of high school or university or changing their courses midway, and the idea of regret of having made a decision, I think it's a pretty heavy one, because it is important to reflect on your actions and see how it's impacted you in your journey so far. But I suppose it is an important message to let our viewers and audience know that seeking this direction can limit you if you focus too much on it, and definitely focusing on your high school experience or university experience, or perhaps just whatever stage you are at in life, that's probably the most important thing. And self-development doesn't just come through, locking yourself in the future for one certain pathway. I agree with that kind of mentality too. So I suppose, do you have any tips on how to maximize one's experience at school or university? You can draw on your own personal experience for this, or friends that you've seen who either really enjoyed university or didn't, and perhaps why they didn't or they did.
Should I? Maybe it's more valuable to talk about university than high school, right? Because most people are listening.
High school, yeah.
Gone, right? High school has disappeared. Is that? What's the general? Because I haven't rubbed shoulders with high schoolers as much in this kind of season in my life. Like in the past, I would, kind of run youth groups and stuff, and I would at least have a bit more of an understanding of the pain points. But it's helpful, really, in terms of what you're sharing, in terms of the messaging around what people are hearing and how to counterbalance it. If I were to guess, the general messaging around university is, hunker down, just get the top marks so that you can then get the job that you need to get the salary, and then tick. That's still the right?
Kind of, yeah.
Particularly if your parents are from overseas or migrant background, you have to just work and study hard. I would say maybe this is, I don't know if it's even practical, but I looked at I felt like in many ways going through university I wasn't fully leveraging the adulthood opportunity of university. I guess if you watch in the US, how they do tertiary university education, they kind of pick up and go, and they leave their parents and they go into a new context. And you're going to have to do that somehow or other. And I would say that was probably one of the things I probably would have leaned into more if I realized just the value would have been to appreciate university as a period that is relatively safe. People aren't expecting too much of you. You shouldn't expect too much of yourself. Your parents probably expect a lot of you, but if somehow you can afford it and you can pay your way through, if you can move out and start being independent early, man, that would be transformation, because you're not then desperately trying to finish a degree to then get a job so that you can then move out. If you somehow can work out a way where, even if it's living cheaply or something, you move out first, then you have the freedom to then go, you don't just have to take the quick, Bachelor of Commerce 3-year degree to quickly then, apply a job and quickly to get out. Like if the opportunity arises, and if you can kind of angle yourself that way, it'd be great if you just, maybe even if you work part-time and then study part-time, then you can feel actually what the world is like, and then take advantage of university by you talk about societies or networks or even just changing your degree, because if you have no real sense of the bigger world if you've just you're still staying at home, you're not really working, you're not paying your own bills, and you're still hanging around the same sorts of people. Like, that's not going to break you out of the mold and make you realize actually how can you use university to equip you. So you talk about Excel skills. Like, for all we know, you might jump into university and you think, I'm going to do those Excel courses, actually only to find out that when you come out after the degree that everyone is into robotics and automation, and Excel, maybe it's useful, but you probably could have been better prepared if you had known back when you're at university. You would have taken maybe a bit more time to study robotics and automation back in university. Like, how would you be able to, how would you know? So I don't know if that's, am I answering it practical enough, or is it too conceptual?
Sure.
I think, okay, so this is my takeaway from it. Not sure what our viewers will have heard and thought in their own mind. But I think your approach to university is that start your independence journey early, because university is a safe place to do that. It's not like high school where you're still with your parents, and so there's still someone who has control over you in a good way. But you want to take your own reign in life and I suppose be responsible for yourself. And university is a place where you can take risks and fail, and still have a backup system to kind of support you, because you're not out in the real world, if you know what I mean. It's still real enough, I suppose.
Does that sound, is that overly familiar? Like, do you hear that shared, that advice shared, or is it typical or atypical?
I've been involved in a few events where I'm lucky enough to have access to this kind of mindset and thinking that my parents haven't provided for me, but I don't think all of my peers at school have. So I guess some people do think university a bit differently, but I know quite a few friends still think that you go to university just for a degree, just to get a job, and it's not really, they haven't thought about the independence part of university as much, because it's just not the first thing that clicks into their mind. I think that's just because of certain cultural or at least sociocultural practices and standards that we have ingrained in our families, or, you know, our own histories. Everyone's experience is slightly different, so I think it depends on what you've been exposed to so far.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's that tension of like keeping up with the Joneses in an education or I guess in an achievement sense. Is that the identity? You've heard this before? I don't know.
No. I found it funny when you mentioned keeping up with the Joneses. Do keep going.
Is that too?
No,
that's
I think a funny phrase.
That's usual.
Yeah.
Right. I guess you've gone through this whole season of high school where success is relative to, okay, well, at least if I speak of my experience, people were going in to do a business degree or be a doctor or a lawyer, and you know, you'd never take TAFE, you'd never go do a trade, you wouldn't, like, it just didn't seem like an even possibility. Like, yeah, it's an option, but you would never be able to go down that path. But to take maybe this is what's hard, is to have courage to inquire of yourself, what do you really want, or and then to have the courage to step out and try something different, and then to actually even stand up to the peer pressure of taking a gap year when no one else is taking a gap year, or, you know, everyone else is going partying when you're not partying. I think it's seasonal, you know, relationships and what people think of you and your standing, your status, your identity. It's seasonal, and I guess that's really hard to get in our I guess as human beings, right? Really hard to come to a sense of peace and resolve that we're not the culmination of what other people see us to be, but really we are. We sleep with ourselves, you know, our consciousness. That's all we have to deal with primarily, and it's really hard to not do something to please people, but to in ways focus on an audience of one in a way. Maybe that's kind of overemphasized, and I can understand practically the problems and the barriers. I would imagine if I heard this back when I was in university or back in high school, I'd be like, oh, he doesn't know what it's going to be like. He has no idea how bad my parents. Well, yeah, but well, you'll regret not at least considering it. Yeah, you regret not considering it. So why not have a moment to think? Yeah.
I think that is an important thing for people, you know, to consider for themselves. Just exactly how much or how many of our decisions are influenced by, I suppose, other people's, whether it be parents or like good intentioned people, still other people's ideas and maybe just society's norms. Because personally, I have been considering a gap year, but it's just really not the normal for people in my school or people nowadays to take a gap year just for the sake of it. I think most people think, you know, get early into university and get a head start in life because you don't want to fall behind. But really, what does it mean to fall behind? Is taking a gap year really falling behind? Like, what? It really does depend on what you prioritize yourself and how you think you can accomplish your goals and what it takes to get there. And yeah, I guess everyone has a different experience and considerations for that, you know. But it is important for people to, you know, think outside the box, and even if they don't take the, I suppose, different path, it's still a thing to consider and not, you know, box off immediately.
Because if I were to, if I were to make an assumption or stereotype that your audience in some ways, you're all aspiring to be leading or leaders or achievers in whatever your field is, rather than just followers or just workers, and like you're aspiring to, you're ambitious, and I guess the challenge is that how can you be a leader? How can you be an expert? How can you be the forefront of your field if you're not firstly resolved on working out internally who you are, where you're going, what you're doing? Because if you're following everyone else around you, just kind of mimicking what everyone else is saying or thinking, and you don't even think for yourself, what's like, are we just following each other? Like, how big of an impact will you have in a work context, or in a, you know, in terms of building a larger business with a large vision, if your vision is only as good as what you've just heard one of your peers has said? So I don't know, that's too extreme of it, and I'm definitely not one to claim I'm there at all or there yet, but I have, from what I read and I guess how I kind of aspire and look up to grow. That's what I would even now be kind of seeking to kind of push and to grow and to come to a deeper sense of self and awareness of how we're designed and how we can then be a positive influence in our context.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Just about sums up perhaps like your philosophy and mentality around many things. I suppose taking that kind of mindset that you have, how has your career journey either worked alongside your personal journey in developing, your own opinions and pathway, or have they perhaps not worked together? Like, for example, your career choices so far from PwC to Headhunter, I think, then to Husky now. Have you made any personal developments along the way that you think are pretty important, or like discoveries about your career?
Well, I don't like if I were to think of, I guess personally, my journey has been so like, I'm envious of the likes of yourself, Lily, and in some ways maybe the context and the peers that you find yourself in, because there's a deeper sense of assuredness and you're applying yourself with this sort of extracurricular activities. And like, I didn't, not to say that I was a complete idiot, but like I didn't have that sense of resolve. Like I wasn't that attuned to it. And so in some ways I feel, that the ambition and drive that you have, there's more likely than not you'll get there. When I was in your position, I didn't have that. I would look inside. I'm like, no, I don't have much confidence. I don't really know what's going to happen. Like I don't know where I'm going to go. It's that sense of like silent despair and fear, actually, and that fear then drives you to. It's not actually a desire to reach for success, but actually it's a fear of just not being left behind, which kind of played me quite significantly. But a part of me was like, oh well, I got a relatively okay ATAR and got into I was like, I'm quite interested in psychology, and so went to that journey of started studying psychology, but then kind of over time, I got into start thinking a little bit more about practically, whether I could get a job or not. I was dating someone and start thinking about if I wanted to have a family, then how would I be able to provide for myself or us as a household? And that kind of like, once again, out of fear, I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't just study psychology. I should just also study accounting. And then that relationship didn't kind of work out. And so I was kind of like, okay, well, now I've got accounting and psychology. But then in some ways, out of fear of not being able to acclimatize to the wider world, because during my time in university, I didn't think through exactly how I could prepare myself for life skills or work skills or whatever to be able to speak to people. I went to an all-boys school, and the all-boys were mainly Asians, and you kind of it's different, right? If you go into a context where it's, I don't know, a white man's world or whatever you want to call it, how did I prepare for myself, right? And out of fear, I kind of thought, okay, maybe I'll just I'll join the Army Reserves, because that was something I thought I wanted to do, because at least I could face my fears that way. So out of that, you kind of opportunities open, and you kind of meet different people, and I guess then I thought, oh, maybe I'll just be a police officer, because I don't think I could ever get a job in finance or in a Big Four, because there were peers I knew who were in Big Four, and they were kind of admired by my family, friends, and parents friends. They'd have all that sort of that aura of, hey, that's what success is. Being a police officer is not part of the success story. But I was like, screw it, I guess I didn't see many opportunities, and so I kind of went down that path, started studying to, I was in the police academy for a bit, and then a door opened in consulting, in management consulting. I was like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, and I didn't have stability. That's not really the way to kind of have a career, right? Okay, fine. The day, it was actually on the day that I was going to get my uniform, was the day that I was going to. I ended up starting the new job at this management consulting place. I remember thinking, is this worth it or not? No. I don't know, maybe. And then did that for a bit. And then I was like, oh, this management consulting place is like, no one knows about this thing. Like, I was going around trying to be like, hey, I've made it now. I'm working in like a business context in management consulting. But, oh, where are you working at? Oh, it's not a big four, is it? Oh, it's not. Oh, okay. Oh, crap. Out of fear, then I kind of thought, okay, maybe I'll just apply. But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a good way to go about it. Like it's like, and so I guess if I were to describe that as a driver, moving into PwC and then moving to headhunting and then to where I am now, I think gradually I've been driven less and less by fear, and like an apprehension of like, oh, I got to do this, I got to do that, and I've learned firsthand. Oh, actually, what people say it isn't actually. Everyone will kind of polish it up a little bit. Oh, Big Four is going to be amazing, and then you go in, oh, and then you do it for a couple of years, and I don't regret doing it at all. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a lot shinier from when people talk about it, then you actually have to live through it. And like, am I going to live my whole life just so that at a party I can say something? Oh, some people do that, but I would rather just improve the journey rather than just the destination. I think that's kind of where I guess I've shifted a little bit my mindset, and I've just been maybe sometimes opportunistic. I'm standing here, hoping for a door to open, and sometimes doors didn't open, and all of a sudden around, like, I applied for a lot of Big Fours. Like some of the mid tiers rejected me, but one of the top Big Fours accepted me. Like, who can control a lot of these things? Was my resume good or not? Well, I don't know. Like I had work experience. I presented myself okay, which is a lot of things not in our control. But what we can control, what I could control, I guess I did what I could. I don't know what was the question, whether that answers it or not.
It's okay. I don't think the answering questions is the most important bit. I think just the key takeaways from, I suppose, your stream of consciousness is really important, especially when you mentioned fear so many times and then success a couple of times. I was thinking in my head, the relationship between fear and success, how I've heard that often fear can drive success, which is like a really important tool, and like it can be very beneficial. However, firstly, always the big question, what is success to you? And secondly, is that kind of a sustainable way to attain success, like to always have fear drive your success? It's not a bad tool. Sometimes it is effective. Like I've heard heaps of people who in desperation created their own startups because they didn't have another option. So, fear of just not being able to sustain yourself and live, of course, is a really important driving factor. But yeah, it's just so many questions to prompt from that, I suppose. So I suppose your relationship with the understanding of success has changed as your relationship with fear has also changed, how fear used to be such a big driver for your, I suppose, journey to success. But it's probably a bit different now. Yeah.
Well, Lily, I appreciate you making me a bit more successful. You used the word before, and you're like, oh, you can, happy for you to tangent, or that's, I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty good at tangenting, and my stream of consciousness maybe is not as helpful. But yeah, I think what you're saying is very astute, and maybe it's just the balance of no longer being as enslaved under fear, but really, how do you push towards freedom, and what does it mean for you to be free? Because really, in many ways, often success is what is success is you feel free to do what you can with what you have, and you can adjust your resources externally or internally. How do you adjust your expectations? So you can have a bit of both. But I understand often when, particularly in migrant families, the poverty mindset is so strong because they came from a place that literally getting something to eat was difficult. Whereas I guess the power and the opportunity that's afforded to us in a Western economy and civilization like ours, assuming people here are brought up in Australia or similar sorts, is not in some ways to be driven by fear, but actually the freedom that we have in this sort of this democratic society. How do we leverage that to support the people around, to innovate, and then to even then share to the wider world innovations and ways of doing things that they wouldn't have the opportunity to, because they literally, like, developing economies economies literally are trying to survive, really it's responsibility of those who have much to give much, right? Because much is expected to those much have been given. So I guess that's how I try to think of it overall.
I think that's a pretty good summary and like drawing of conclusions between the different cultures, I suppose, and the relationship that we've had with, like, you know, history and poverty, things like that, how that drives our different mentalities and perhaps approaches to, I suppose, success in life. Maybe just to wrap up, a few questions that our high school audience were really interested in. I think they're also pretty quick. So have platforms like LinkedIn been significant in your journey, perhaps?
Yeah, well, intrinsically it's a motivator. So, you know, sometimes you kind of, you brush up on your LinkedIn and go, oh, okay, yeah, this is where I've come, this is where I want to go. You look at other people's LinkedIn, I guess. But then also, you know, LinkedIn is meant to open doors, right? So, yes.
Has anyone been a mentor to you in your journey, perhaps?
Yeah, each season I've had different mentors fortuitously. You know, PwC, he's a partner now, but when I first met him was the director. He was a huge influence on, he wasn't just a work mentor, he was also I have a Christian faith, and so he was also a spiritual mentor to me, and just the power of understanding and putting balance into a context where often, work context, they want to take everything out of you, to see someone who's journeyed and, you know, is successful, advocate that life is more than just about work, and you got to have, you know, health, spiritual health, you know, physical health, and family, and other ambitions and other aspects of life. So that, yes, I have. And one of my other mentors, life mentors, he passed away a year or two ago. He was in his 80s. I think that was the power of mentorship. I think is the generational gap is very important. If you keep on looking to people who are just too close to you, you're like, sometimes it's the blind leading the blind.
Yeah, okay. I think those are enough questions for today. So that probably concludes the podcast episode for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Darren. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to share your industry insight and personal experiences with our audience. I'm sure they feel as enlightened as I do and have drawn many conclusions from this. That would be lovely. So have a fantastic week, everyone, and see you next time.